الحمد لله وحده والصلاة والسلام على من لا نبي بعده وعلى آله وصحبه ومن تمسك بسنته إلى يوم الدين وسلم تسليما كثيرا أما بعد. As we continue this tremendous book entitled Fataawa and Hamawiyyah al-Kubra by the great Imam Taqiyuddin Ahmad ibn Abdul Halim ibn Abdul Salam ibn Taymiyyah al-Harrani Dimashqi rahimahullah, the one who died 728 after the migration of our Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam. With the time now 7:05 p.m. Thursday, January the 12th, 2023, which agrees on the Hijri calendar, was inshallah the 19th of Jumad al-Akhirah, but technically it is the evening of Friday. It is Laylatul Jumu'ah, the year 1444 after the migration of our Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. As we continue in this treatise, with Allahi alhamd, by the tawfiq of Allah, and inshallah by ikhlas, we finish the journey of this first volume. This is what we completed. This is what's basically left, the volume. So, bi'idhnillah, as we continue in this affair, where inshallah we ask Allah to allow us to complete this benefit, bi'idhnillah, and stay focused and not to be sidetracked by outside influences, but to stay on point. For a person that has sidq, they have truthfulness and ikhlas and sincerity with Allah, then Allah will give them and grant them tawfiq in their affairs. For those who seek fame, then Allah will give them what they want of this world. For people who set out for the pleasure of Allah, Allah grants them tawfiq. So you'll find, ya ma'ashar al-ikhwa, as we continue, you'll find the great Imam, he continues to say in this tremendous treatise, وَرَوَى اللَّكَائِيُّ وَالْبَيْهَقِيُّ. We already finished the statement of the great Imam Abu Ubayd Qasim ibn Salam. We finished that, right, everyone? But you'll find that we mentioned the aqidah of this great Imam Abu Ubayd Qasim ibn Salam, rahimahullah. He was considered from the great ai of the past. In light of what you'll find that the great Imam Ahmad even said about him, and others from Ahl Ilm. But this great Imam Abu Ubayd al-Qasim ibn Salam, rahimahullah. As we completed his statement in light of what Shaykh al-Islam had conveyed upon him of what was his belief, and like we mentioned previously, that those who lived in the past, closer to the generation of nubuwah, of prophethood, during the life of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, of course, and those who came after him from his great companions, and those who followed the companions who are the tabi'een, those are the generations, of course, where the Masjid of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam described them with having the characteristic of khayriyah, of being the best. The best meaning in regards to them clinging to what's correct, clinging to the pure Islam and its understanding, and the orthodox Islam, because they knew that the salvation of the human beings in this world and the hereafter depends on it. For you'll find, ya ma'ashar al-ikhwa, that those who traversed that path and who came after them and who lived during their time, that's what they understood. And from them who followed the tabi'een, who came after the companions of the Messenger of Allah, and those who came after the tabi'een, who were the followers of the tabi'een. These scholars lived close to their time. And this is what they understood of belief in regards to what is the solidified, sound foundation in regards to a Muslim's belief, in regards to the most vital of knowledge, which is concerning Allah Himself. So you'll find that the great Imam, as we finalize his statement at the end, I think we mentioned it last night, we said, وهو أشهر من أن يوصف وقد كان في الزمان الذي ظهرت فيه الفتن والأهواء وقد أخبر أنه ما أدرك أحدا من العلماء يفسرها أي تفسير الجهمية. He said, indeed, it was in that time in which trials and tribulations became what? Apparent. when they manifested, and people following their desires in this matter, meaning those who went astray. They wanted to follow what suited their desires, and they left the correct path. He says, indeed, he is informed, meaning this great Imam, Shaykh al-Islam is saying this statement here. He says, indeed, he had informed that he did not reach any one of those scholars explaining it. We talked about this last night when he said this. Explaining it, meaning, they explained it the meaning of the Jahmiyyah, meaning those who negated the attributes and names of Allah. Those who negated it or likened it with the creation. So this is what he said, and this is what we talked about last class, and this is where we finalize the explanation. So as we continue with the next statement. So Shaykh al-Islam is citing from what that tremendous treatise entitled Sharh Usul I'tiqad Ahl Sunnah by the great Imam Al-Lalaka'i, which is from the greatest maraji' of those resources, or if you want to say, those references that we return back to in regards to what was the position of the companions as far as their belief concerning Allah. Did they used to negate, did they used to distort the meanings when Allah said He descends or He ascends? All those matters, as we said, what was the position of the companions in regards to them? Did they used to twist the meaning? Did they say, no, it doesn't mean this, rather it means something else? Those are the matters, like we mentioned, that the scholars of the past, as we said last class, realized the importance of adhering to what was correct. So Al-Laka'i goes on to say, with Bayhaqi, he brings the statement of the great Imam Abdullah ibn al-Mubarak, rahimahullah, أن رجلا قال له يا أبا عبد الرحمن إني أكره الصفة على صفة الرب. فقال له عبد الله ibn al-Mubarak أنا أشد الناس كراهة لذلك، لكن إذا نطق الكتاب بشيء قلنا به، وإذا جاءت الآثار بشيء جسرنا عليه. To the end of it. Al-Laka'i brought another statement upon, and the great Imam al-Bayhaqi, upon the great Imam from Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, Abdullah ibn al-Mubarak, rahimahullah. There was a man that said to him, O Abu Abdur Rahman, verily I hate as-sifa. I hate as-sifa. He says, I hate the characteristics, meaning the characteristics of Allah. What does he mean by that? We'll talk about that in a second. Don't worry. So Abdullah ibn Mubarak replied to him. He said, I am the most stern of people, of those who detest that. Meaning, we'll talk about in a second, karahatan lidalik, meaning that I am the most of those who are stern in detesting that I say anything in regards to Allah from my opinion, or from what I feel, or from what is from my rationale, or from my intellect. Meaning that this affair revolves around revelation, no more, no less. So that's what he's speaking about. So you'll find that he says, I'm the most stern of people who detest that. However, if the book of Allah speaks of that affair, or anything of that, we say it. It's clear. And if the athar, the narrations that are authentic, affirms it, of anything, then we say it. Then we say it. And we have no problem in saying it. Jasarna alayh. Meaning that we have no problem in mentioning that matter. So, Abdullah ibn Mubarak, rahimahullah, he said, أَنَا أَشَدُّ النَّاسِ كَرَاهَةً لِذَلِكَ. I'm the most stern of the people of what? Of detesting that affair. As we said, the meaning of it, of this statement by the great Imam Abdullah ibn Mubarak, saying, بِأَنْ أَصِفَ اللَّهَ مِنْ عِنْدِ نَفْسِي, that I give a description of my Lord from myself. Meaning that these affairs are all what everyone? Tawqifi. Tawqifi meaning affairs that's connected strictly and exclusively with revelation. No one can give anything of a description concerning Allah from their own opinion, or from their own desires, or from their own whims, or from their own intellect, or what they deem to be befitting for Allah, or what they deem not befitting for Allah. All those affairs are disregarded, except what Allah has mentioned concerning Himself, either in His book, or in the authentic sunnah of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Other than that, it is not permissible for anyone to what? Mention anything about Allah Ta'ala, except that they have an affair that's been clearly established from those two sources. Or from the athar. And we're going to talk about that in a minute, the athar. Because we know the athar is not only the authentic narrations, of course, the authentic statements of the companions, but it's also, of course, in regards to the authentic sunnah. So it can mean both meanings, as we'll talk about in a second, inshallah. So that's what you'll find, that he was the sternest, the most stern of those who are what? Very, very strict in regards to not mention something of Allah, except that he knows it's been established in the Kitab and Sunnah. يَسْتَصْعِبُونَ وَيَكْرَهُونَ أَن يَتَجَرَّأُوا عَلَى اللَّهِ. You'll find that the people of the past, due to their fear of Allah and their piety, they found it very difficult and hard, and they detested to have the gall or the nerve to speak about Allah without revelation. Bringing some of their affair for themselves, just as those who had the gall to do that, who the scholars have been affected by Greek philosophy, such as ulama al-kalam. Those scholars, so-called, that have been affected by Greek philosophy, and they tried to mix it with revelation. From the deviant sects of the Jahmiyyah and the Mu'tazila and the Asha'ira and those embarked upon their path, as we know, they had gave precedence to their minds and intellects over revelation. Those are the people who have been affected with Greek philosophy, and as a result of it, they fell into these great atrocities and these great errors, and as a result of it, they went astray. Meaning, they subjected themselves to the punishment of Allah of landing in hell as a result of embracing these warped, perverted ideologies. So that's what you'll find why the great Imam of the past were very stern in these matters, because they were very important in regards to the Muslims' belief. Like we said, these affairs became so dangerous to the point where, like we said, it led them to the road of atheism. A person might ask, why are you so adamant about teaching these books? Because like we said, when the people adopted philosophy, in Greek philosophy, and it broke down the Muslim structure in regards to them being unified in the belief system, it rendered them in a state of weakness, number one, where they became divided in groups and schisms and parties, divide and conquer, which made the Muslims extremely weak. That's number one. Number two, what came as a result of it, it led them down a road of atheism. Because once they started negating all the attributes of Allah, once you open the door, it gets bigger, 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 and what happened? Allah has no names and attributes. So what happened? Complete atheism. Third thing, in regards to why these affairs are dangerous, because it removed the affairs of the belief of the day of resurrection. And he started to twist it and said it's not real. Everything has a rational explanation why it happens. No, there is no hereafter. There's a rational reason, or there's a so-called a matter in which we can rationalize of why certain things happen. There is no unseen. There is no shayateen. There is no angels. There is no punishment in the grave. There is no day to the end of the nonsense. That's why we study these books, and why we're so adamant about teaching it to the people, because their survival or the success of themselves, of their souls, relies on being stern and steadfast upon these matters. Is it clear, everyone? Yeah. So that's why you'll find that the great Imam Abdullah ibn Mubarak, you with me? Just think. No, you seem like you're in deep thought. وإذا جاءت الآثار بشيء جسرنا عليه. Says قلنا ذلك بشجاعة. So you can find, how many of the Muslims do we know have become misled by these matters? A lot. Not realizing that they're involved in affairs of atheism. How many masajid teach these matters about the intellect is stronger than revelation? Yahi, that's the affairs that led to atheism and to the negation of Allah's existence. And you'll find Muslims what? Teaching this nonsense. And will make war with you over it, and they might even kill you over it. Over affairs of the hellfire. Philosophy, Greek philosophy. What do you think is going to lead down the road? To believe in Allah or doubt in Allah? So those are the matters, as we said, Ya Ma'ashar al-Ikhwan. وَإِلَّا مَا كُنَّا نَجْسُلُ عَلَى ذَلك. This is what the great Imam Abdullah ibn Mubarak was mentioning. He said, if the athar comes, we say it with all what? Bravery, bishaja'. وَبِدُونْ تَرَدُّد. If Allah has said it about Himself, we say it. Clear. If Allah has mentioned it about Himself, we say, our Lord, you said that about Yourself, we say it. No problem. And we have no hesitation. ما كنا نجسر على ذلك ولولا ثبوت ذلك في الكتاب والسنة. We have no reluctancy in that matter. As we know, if it wasn't for the kitab and sunnah, of course, then we refrain. But if it's been approved and been established, we say it with no hesitation. Al-Murad al-Athar. So that's what now we're going to talk about when he's mentioned about the Athar. The word al-Athar, as we said, is the al-Ahadith al-Sahiha, the authentic narrations of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So, we just said, Allah says it in His book, number one. Number two, if the affair has been affirmed in the authentic sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. As we know, the Athar, this word, can be used for the authentic narrations of the Messenger of Allah, and it can also be used for what, everyone? Athar al-Sahaba. The narrations of the companions, their statements. Athar al-Sahaba, as we know, in this matter what we're speaking about now, are accepted in this affair of Aqidah, and it can be given the ruling of a hadith of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Why do we say that, everyone? We mentioned this, the answer. If the Sahaba speak of a statement of the affairs of the unseen, especially the affairs of Allah, and that chain is connected, it takes the ruling of a hadith of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Why? Because none of the Sahaba would talk about these affairs unless they extracted that understanding directly from the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Hence, they would never have the nerve to speak about the affairs of the unseen from their own opinion. It's not permissible. It's not permissible to speak about the affairs of the unseen from your own what? Opinion. In our religion, it's impermissible. Why? Because the affairs of the unseen are the most sacred of affairs. No one can speak about those matters except it is based upon revelation. You leave it, it's okay. As you'll find that the affairs of Aqidah, the affairs of belief, and the affairs of the unseen, you'll find that they mention the qa'idah, the principle which is لا مجال للرأي فيها. It is not permissible for one to give their own opinion in it. That's the reason why the Athar of the Sahaba can be given the hukum or the ruling of the hadith al-marfu' al-sahih, the authentic narration that's been ascribed to the Messenger of Allah, if that Sahabi is speaking about something concerning Allah or the affairs of the unseen. As far as the affairs of fiqh, that's something different. But the most sacred of knowledge, as we mentioned and said, everyone, you'll find that none of the Sahaba will speak about those matters except that they attained that understanding from the Messenger of Allah alayhi salatu wasalam, or they extracted that understanding from the Messenger of Allah alayhi salatu wasalam, and they spoke on it. So that's the reason why the Athar of the Sahaba are accepted in this affair, what we're speaking about now, if they are talking about affairs connected with our Lord. Then it takes the ruling of a hadith of the Messenger of Allah. So that's what we mentioned. As we said, كالأثر الذي مر بنا أثر عبد الله بن عباس وإلا لا بد أن يكون الحديث الذي نثبت به صفات الرب حديثا مرفوعا صحيحا ثابتا لا غبار عليه وإن كان صرفنا الصالح لا يشترطون أن يكون الحديث متواترا. We're going to talk about, we already mentioned this before on many occasions, but no problem to repeat it again in order to establish the information more. طيب, كالأثر, like for example, the narration we covered a couple of weeks ago, where the great Imam Abu Ubayd al-Qasim al-Sallam talked about the kursi. He said that from the aqeedah of the Muslims that we believe above the heavens there's a kursi. Allah has mentioned that in His book, in the ayah. It's called what, everyone? Clear. Ayatul Kursi. It's clear. Ayatul Kursi. The ayat of the kursi of Allah. Abdullah ibn Abbas mentioned what the kursi is. What is the kursi, everyone? Mawdi'ul qadamayn. It is the place of the 2 feet of Allah. Abdullah ibn Abbas mentioned that. That narration of Abdullah ibn Abbas takes the hukm of what? Of al-hadith al-marfu'. Of the ruling of a hadith that's authentic and ascribed to the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because Abdullah ibn Abbas would never say an affair like that unless it was what? Extracted directly from the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Is from those affairs in which is not permissible for anyone to give their opinion in. So that's from the examples we gave. He said, it's that matter or that example that we gave in addition to those other authentic narrations of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that we already what? Have mentioned numerous examples of. Affirming characteristics of Allah. A narration that's marfu', that is ascribed to the Messenger of Allah, authentic, established, and that has no what? No type of doubt concerning it. Hence, as we know, our righteous predecessors, meaning the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the companions of those who follow them, with perfections from those 3 generations. You'll find, everyone, none of them gave as a prerequisite concerning those narrations that it had to be mutawatir. As we mentioned this on numerous occasions, those narrations about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they could be mutawatir or they could be ahad. In actuality, these type of terms weren't even these type of terms, back a little bit away from the speaker. Maybe not, I like the feedback. These type of terms, tawatur and ahad, originally came from the people of what? Kalam. They came from the people of rhetoric and the people who's affected by Greek philosophy. They're the ones who brought these terms. They brought these terms, those who've been affected by Greek philosophy, and those who became from those so-called deviant sects in Islam that have been affected by it, they're the ones who brought these categories. Originally, they're the ones that started it. That in order for a hadith so-called to be accepted, there has to be mutawatir. Meaning, what does the meaning of tawatur? Tawatur, there has to be an abundant number of narrators that has related it in order to so-called remove the doubt. There has to be, for example, it could be 15, 20, 30, 40. So some of the Sahaba had to have been 15 Sahaba that had to say it. 20, 30, 40, 50, 60. Tawatur has to reach that level in order for us to what? Accept it. Except that if it's from the affairs of ahad, meaning one Sahabi narrated it. In that case, we have doubt concerning it, which is absolute nonsense. The only thing in regards to our affairs of what we accept a narration or reject it is the affairs connected with thubut. Whether or not the prerequisites of the authenticity of the hadith has been fulfilled. No more, no less. Hence, the people of the Sunnah in the past never used to look at whether the affair was mutawatir or ahad. That was the affairs of those who was affected by Greek philosophy, putting in those conditions. And some of the Muslims adopted it, and the people who were affected by these affairs brought these matters in order to cast doubt in the hearts of the Muslims concerning their Lord. That's the reason why these categories was adopted. Not realizing that the Muslims did not realize the plot that was being executed or carried out against them. So when they adopted these matters, as a result, they started to now negate the attributes of Allah and say, oh, that particular characteristic came from the affairs of ahad, meaning what Sahabi narrated it, we don't accept it. Even though it's authentic. Even though all the prerequisites and the criteria for the narration to be authentic has been fulfilled, even though that's the case, we still reject it. Even though these categories was brought by them, they still don't follow it. For example, the hadith of the Messenger of Allah ﷺ said that Allah descends every night. في نزول الرب تبارك وتعالى في الثلث الليل الآخر. Hadith not only in Bukhari Muslim, hadith that has reached the level of tawatur. Shaykh al-Islam has a whole book on it, affirming that this affair has reached the level of tawatur, and they still don't affirm it. They'll either say no, it's weak, or they say no, it's not Allah that descends. It's either His angels, or His mercy, or His commands, or the other type of distorted meanings they try to bring in place in order for them to flee away from saying that Allah descends. So you find that the affair is what? It's all as they say, if you want to say for lack of better words, they're capping. It's all cap. You understand, everyone? Because if a person so-called lays down a principle, they're going to follow it to the end. They're not going to contradict it. Contradictions is what's exposed that the person is not what? Is not true and liable what they say. Or else the qa'idah is going to become jami'a mani'a. It's a qa'idah that could be followed through. And even though, like we said, even in Kitab al-Sunnah, where you'll find that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed perfect revelation, the exception to the rule of that certain affairs, and you'll see the hikmah why there's a certain little exception. For example, the impermissibility of ghiba. Listen to the exceptions to the rule that Allah, out of His infinite knowledge, knew there had to be an exception. For example, when someone comes to marry your daughter, and you want to know about the individual, and you ask concerning them, you want people to be truthful of what this individual is. Is he a true, honest individual, or is he a liar? Who is he? Here, it's not deceit, and it's not ghiba. It's what? It's advice. It's permissible to tell you what that individual is. Complete, perfect revelation. Everything is in its proper place. Allah knew, of course, the kiba'ir, of course, the original hukm is that it is impermissible of backbiting, but there's certain what? Exceptions to the rule. The matters we said, Ya ma'ashal ikhwa, in regards to these matters, as far as the people of bid'ah, they completely contradict themselves. And I just gave you an example of it in regards to the hadith of nuzul, of the descension of Allah every night. That hadith has reached the level of tawatur, with no doubt. And they still don't affirm it. So like we said, everyone, when these doubts started affecting the hearts of the Muslims, and even in certain matters, you'll find that some of the scholars in the past of the usuliyin, the scholars of usul al-fiqh, what they call al-usuliyun, became affected. Until they started making the prerequisite that it had to be what? Mutawatir. They even started to what? Become affected. And some of the scholars of the past, ulama al-mustalah, they even became affected. Like we said, gradually, the affairs of kalam started to what? Started to taint the matters, till a group of them said that the ahadith, all of it is not accepted. All of it is rejected. What do they say? Because it has the probability, maybe perhaps it would have been narrated by its meaning. For that reason, they rejected all of the narrations of the Messenger of Allah ﷺ, until the shaitan gradually brought them around to another what? Another philosophical statement in order to reject revelation. What did they say? They say, Al-adillat al-lafdiyya kulluha ghayr maqbula. All the wording, so-called wording narrations, meaning the authentic narrations of the Message of Allah ﷺ, all of it is not acceptable in this affair of Aqidah. That's what they say. And then they try to justify it. وَعَلَّلُوا ذَلِكَ بِعِلَلٍ. Then they try to justify that with numerous unacceptable reasons. What are those ilal? What are those reasons that have been affected by it? He says because they fakham. This is what they say. This is how they trick people. Now listen to the so-called beginning. Now listen to what they say. They'll bring something of truth, and then right in the end, they go against what they're mentioning. Now listen to this. Bab al-Aqidah, Bab al-Khatir, wa Bab al-Azim. They say the affair of belief or the creed of a Muslim is a dangerous matter, and it's a tremendous affair. Isn't that true? That's absolutely true. كلمة حق أريد بها الباطل Of course, a person will bring a statement of truth, but is intended by a falsehood. Continue. He says, حقا, no doubt. Bab al-Aqidah, the affair of creed, is not an easy affair. It is very dangerous and it is very great. This is the introduction they utilize, but listen to what comes after it. They said, Yaqul, if the affair is like how we mentioned, that the affair of Aqidah is dangerous, then the adillah, the evidence and proofs that we use in order to affirm for Allah His characteristics, there has to be adillah qat'iyyah. There has to be evidence and proofs that has no doubt in it. More truth that they mentioned. This is true. Alright, now you have to ask the question. What is al-adillah al-qat'iyyah? What is definite evidences that has no doubt, that removes all doubt? What is it? Now they're going to say of what they want. Now they're going to start showing it. Al-adillah al-qat'iyyah hiya al-adillah al-aqliyyah. The solidified, so-called undoubtful evidence and proofs is the evidences of the intellect. So they started off with something of truth, then they now started to put their poison in. So they didn't say it is the adillah of revelation. It's the adillah that agrees with the rationality and intellect of the individual. That's adillah al-qat'iyyah, adillah al-aqliyyah. Evidence and proofs that agrees with the intellect. So the source of what we rely upon goes back to our intellects. Doesn't go back to revelation. That's from whose philosophy? Greek philosophy. It's not from the Muslims, that's foreign. Has nothing to do with Islam. That the intellect will be utilized as a source of what is negated or affirmed for our Lord Ta'ala. Why do they say this? They say, as for the evidences or the evidence of revelation, it's not qat'iyyah. It's not affairs that removes doubt. It's not certain. Why isn't it not certain? It's madhindatun lin-nasakh wa tafsir, because it's the affair that probably can be either abrogated or it needs some more detail. Affairs that doesn't make any sense. And for that reason, it's not qat'iyyah. It's not evidences that is what? Solid. Rather, the affairs connected with the intellect. He says, so you'll find that the shaitan came to these people gradually, giving them a process until the point where they just totally rejected Kitab and Sunnah as an affair that's utilized as an evidence and proof in regards to the most greatest of all knowledge, which is the affairs connected with Aqidah of the Muslim, especially the matters connected with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And look how, as you look to the history, shaitan just gradually, until the point where as if the Kitab and Sunnah has no value to it. Has no value. So that is the matters you find, they said, in regards to the names and the attributes of Allah, in regards to the adillah, as they say, al-lafdiyah. وَإِنَّمَا يُعْمَلُ بِالْأَدِلَّةِ الْلَفْظِيَّةِ فِي الْأَحْكَامِ الْفِقْهِيَّةِ. They say that the evidences from Kitab and Sunnah, which they give it the title, adillah lafdiyah, like the wording, the so-called wording of evidences, or the evidences of wording, or words that are uttered, as they so-called to call it, those matters are only used in affairs of fiqh. Al-Ahkam al-Fiqhiyah. So they now remove Kitab al-Sunnah from the most dangerous of all matters. Does that make any sense? So the most greatest of all affairs, that can't be used. He says, for that reason, you'll find that the affair is so dangerous until the point where, as it said, it leads to disbelief in the Book of Allah and the Sunnah of the Masjid of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Why? Because those matters causes doubt in the most greatest of all affairs, which is revelation. So the huda, the true guidance, you have doubt concerning it. It's not really something we use. So what is it that we use over consider the affair of what the people were properly guided by, which was the light that Allah sent down to save people from hell, other than Kitab and Sunnah? What is there after that? Except affairs that's connected with your intellect and your mind. That's why we said these matters are extremely dangerous. And to this day, you'll find that there are people that are still calling to this nonsense. And they will argue you down of these matters because it's affairs, as they say, so-called that if our mind agrees with it, we accept it, and if it what? Rejects it, even if it comes to Kitab and Sunnah, we reject it. It causes doubt concerning one's iman, where one does not perceive. And how many people have been involved in Greek philosophy from the Muslims until they utter clear statements of kufr? Clear statements. Oh, that comes in the book of Allah. That verse I don't really... it's very extremely dangerous. So that's the matters that we mentioned and said again. So listen to how they use statements of truth. والباب خطير جدا وربما تقرؤون هذا الكلام في بعض كتب أصول الفقه وفي كتب الأشاعرة وربما تسربت هذه الفكرة إلى بعض مصطلح الحديث التي يؤلفها علماء الكلام فلينتبه طلاب العلم لهذه المسألة الخطيرة لأنهم تدرجوا إلى إخراج الكتاب والسنة من الميدان بهذه الطريقة. We also mentioned and said, you'll find that they mention these type of words that you consider true. It is unfair, that's dangerous, very dangerous. You'll find this speech, you'll read it in some of the books of the scholars of Usul Fiqh and some of the books of those who are upon the belief of the deviant sect called the Asha'ira saying this. And however, you'll find even perhaps that this idea had even creeped in with some of those who are upon the Mustalah al-Hadith, those who became affected by some of the affairs of the science of Hadith, in which some of the scholars who've been affected by Kalam in the past, that wrote in their books, they put some of that speech in there, not realizing where it came from. It came from the atrocities of those who adopted Greek philosophy, and started putting it in them. So those affairs like one needs to be on guard against. So let the student of knowledge be very aware of this very dangerous matter. Like we said, they gradually came around until they removed from Kitab and Sunnah from the affairs of the religion, not considering it anything or something that's considered that it's like the icing on the cake. It's not the cake at all. Rather, it just decorates it. What does it decorate? The affairs of the aqliyat, of the affairs of the intellect. What is correct, everyone? We'll mention this quickly, and we almost finished. What is called al-adillat al-qat'iyyah, the definite evidences and proofs, are the evidences of the Kitab and Sunnah. Adillat al-kitab, the evidences of the book, is the speech of Allah. وَلَيْسَ هُنَاكَ كَلَامْ أَصَحْ وَنَقْطَعْ بِصَحَّتِهِ غَيْرَ كَلَامِ اللَّهِ. What is considered adillah qat'iyyah is the speech of Allah. There is nothing of speech more authentic than the book of Allah, than the speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in which we are able to have no doubt concerning its authenticity. Nothing being more authentic other than the speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Of course, after the speech of Allah, the speech of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, in which you'll find that the ummah, that they conveyed and they accepted, and they consider that to be a dalil al-qat'i, that evidence that has no doubt, which is utilized in our belief and what is applied in our actions. Can you imagine of affairs that a person was to read the book of Allah? And even, I've heard even some of the Muslims in this city, these type of doubts are even becoming They're even starting to become adopted again. Oh yeah, that's from the book of Allah. Oh, the Sunnah of the Messenger of Allah. Leave those ahadiths. Oh, extremely dangerous. What is the meaning of Muhammad Rasulullah then with you? That Muhammad is the Messenger of Allah. What does it mean with you then? Don't you know there's 2 revelations? Do you believe in that? It's not just the book of Allah only. The authentic Sunnah of the Messenger of Allah is considered al-wahyu al-marwiyyah, the revelation that was conveyed and transmitted. That's revelation. As a result of it, that one rejects it, then that person could be promised entering the hellfire as a result of rejecting it. Those affairs are extremely dangerous. Matters that we said that the people have any doubt concerning that, that perhaps, like we said, the fire or the punishment of Allah awaits that individual as a result of rejection. One narration of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as Imam Ahmed used to say, that I reject some statement of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, فَيَقَعْ فِي قَلْبِي شَيْءٌ مِنَ الزَّيْغِ فَأَهْلَكَ. That something of deviation will fall in my heart, and as a result of it, I'll be destroyed. That rejection of the message of Allah in one statement or some of a statement could come as a result of it, humiliation and disgrace from Allah Ta'ala, and leading that person astray. So, the thing that we wanted to mention, what is considered al-dalil al-qat'i, that true, sound evidence that's been established without any doubt concerning it, is the authentic evidences. The two revelations, al-wahyu al-matluwa wal-wahyu al-marwiya. The two revelations, the wahyu that's matluwa, the one that's recited, and al-wahyu al-marwiya, and the one that was transmitted from the narrators, which is the sunnah of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Amma al-aql, as for the intellect, when kana salihan wa saliman. Now listen to this great point that the great Imam Muhammad al-Jami says, and I want everyone to listen to this. He says, as for the intellect, if it's salih, salim, if it has not been affected by outside influences, the mind, the rationale, or the rationality, or the human mind, or the human intellect, if it's salih, salim, if it has not been affected by Greek philosophy or outside corrupted influences or perverted ideas, it will not oppose the evidences and proofs from the Kitab and Sunnah. Rather, it will submit to it. He says, وَإِنْ كَانَ مُشَوِّشًا مُلَوَّثًا سَوْفَ لَا يَقْبَلْ. However, it's been affected, tainted, it won't accept it. إنما يحصل التعارض بين الأدلة العقلية والنقلية إما لعدم صحة الأدلة النقلية كأن يستدل بعض الضعفاء في علم الحديث بالأحاديث الموضوعة أو الضعيفة. He says, verily the opposition, that it only comes between those evidences so-called, that they call intellectual evidences, and the evidences from the Kitab and Sunnah. It says either due to the fact of the unauthenticity of it, of course, then a person is going to reject it if it's not authentic. Of course a person is going to reject it. Or is some of those who have been affected by outside influences that use as the evidences fabricated narrations, due to the fact that they follow their desires in another affair, due to the fact that they embrace unauthentic proofs, where one does not what? Do them. So you'll find that the atrocity or the problem comes from another matter, where a person follows their desires in another affair, where they use weak narrations or fabricated narrations as evidences and proofs, where those matters, as a result of it, are rejected. Then of course, if the intellect has not been affected and it has submitted to revelation, when they hear a fabricated hadith, they're going to reject it. That's a person using their mind in its proper place. Using the human mind in its proper place is to submit to the revelation, and if something comes in opposition to it, then you reject it. That's still using your intellect in your proper place, because you're still submitted to the revelation. Not what? Fighting the revelation by giving precedence to your mind over it. That's the matter that he's trying to mention here. That the intellect and the evidences and proofs from the Kitab al Sunnah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made the mind to submit to it and to follow it, not to reject it. And that the mind was used to submit to the revelation and for allow the revelation to guide it so it can be used in its proper place. The people of philosophy switch it. They make the mind and let their mind guide the Kitab and Sunnah. And as a result of it, they fell into what? Disbelief. And that's what we're mentioning. As we said, the book that has been established in this matter with Shaykh al-Islam gives volumes and volumes talking about how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made the human mind to submit to revelation and for the mind to be guided by it in this book called Dar al-Ta'arud wal-Naql. Dar al-Ta'arud al-Aql wal-Naql. Dar al-Ta'arud al-Aql wal-Naql means removing the notion that the human mind came to oppose the revelation. That's the title book. Removing the doubt or the notion that the human mind came to reject revelation. He wrote a whole book on it. It's an encyclopedia. And he brings evidences and proofs after proofs that the mind can be used in its proper place in order to be guided by the Book of Allah and the Sunnah of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And that you'll find that the mind, if it's guided by in that affair, it will be utilized in its proper way, where the people's actions will be the most righteous, as a result of allowing the Kitab and Sunnah to guide their minds where it's supposed to go and where it's supposed to be. But when you switch it, and you make your mind to guide the Book of Allah and the Sunnah of the Messenger of Allah, that's when the affairs become what? Dangerous and chaotic. And that's what happened to those who fell into these type of extreme perverted ideologies. As a result, they became destroyed. Right. So let's read one statement of Abdullah ibn Mubarak and we'll stop, because we almost finished. Alhamdulillah. Shaykh al-Islam goes on to say, أراد ابن المبارك أنا أكره أن نبتدي بوصف الله من ذات أنفسنا حتى يجيء به الكتاب والآثار. So Shaykh al-Islam even mentions the explanation of Abdullah ibn Mubarak himself. He said, Abdullah ibn Mubarak rahimahullah, that he means by the statement that I detest that I start by describing Allah min dhati anfusina, meaning from ourselves, until there comes from something established in the Book of Allah and the Athar. And we'll stop here inshallah. It's Abdullah ibn Mubarak that he said that the meaning of his narration is, I hate that I start or give any description of Allah from ourselves until the Book of Allah comes and the athar or the narrations come. So that's basically what he's saying. He's just saying that Abdullah ibn Mubarak is the stern of people, that those who do not want to mention anything of their opinion concerning Allah at all, being very stern in that regard, because like we said, it's a affair that's very dangerous. Tafadhal.
Just out of curiosity, coming from having such excellence with the revelation, what did do people in the past find attractive about the Greek philosophy? Or was it just over time of living and mixing with different cultures?
That's what it was. A lot of cultures, a lot of people were embracing Islam. And some of the Muslims, for some odd reason, they just became amazed at some of the affairs that they were partaking in. And the affair, like we said, they started translating them, and somehow it just ended in the hands of the... You can even, what's more bewildering, go back to now during the time of the Sahaba. Who would think that someone would try to go out? Well, number one, let me go back even more. Something burning?
No. All
right. Somebody smell something burning? No, I don't smell anything. Majority of the devious sects in Islam, all of them, was started by a non-Muslim. It started by a non-Muslim who their ideas were adopted, or they came within the ranks of the Muslims and started pushing their poison. Who would think that there would be people that would worship Ali ibn Abi Talib during his time while he was living? So you have Sahaba still alive, and at the same time people falling into polytheism with Ali while he was alive. As you'll find that the affairs of the Khawarij and the deviant sects from the Shia was started and was propagated by Abdullah ibn Saba al-Yahudi al-Yamani. He was a Jew. He was Jewish and he was from Yemen. He's the one that came with the plan and the plot in order to kill and assassinate Uthman ibn Affan and Ali ibn Abi Talib. He started and aroused all that fitan. And he's the one that actually came with the poison. We poisoned certain people until there were people amongst the people that lived during the time of Ali to deitize him, make him a deity. So don't think that it's far off that even though there are people who are upon what's correct, that there will be certain people that will be misled and misguided. Even during the time of the Message of Allah, if you want to go back more, there's people that lived during the time of the Message of Allah sallallahu and those tribes that embraced Islam during the last time when the Message of Allah passed away sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Some of the tribes apostated. So, what happened with Abu Bakr or Umar? What did they have to do? And some of them started following the false prophets after the Message of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. From them was Sajah. From them was the Mutanabbi'een. You raising your hand? Tafadhal. I didn't finish my statement. No problem. So you find it was found the Mutanabbi'een, some of those who claim false prophethood. From them was Aswad al-Ansi, who's from Yemen. From them was Sajah. From them was Musaylimah al-Kadhdhab. From them was Mukhtar, who came after, of course, al-Mukhtar. Other than those who followed false prophets. Aswad al-Ansi, who emerged during the time of the Message of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and Abu Bakr, of course, sent the people out in order to get him. He claimed prophethood. He claimed prophethood. Some of the people followed him. Right? As a result of it, those who claimed as a prophet of the Message of Allah is kufr. So Abu Bakr had to bring all those people back. And Abu Bakr had to also fight people who thought that the zakat were only during the time of the Message of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So he had to fight all of those people. Some of those tribes that went astray started following the false prophets. In addition to what? Those who said that zakat were only for during the time of the Message of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So Abu Bakr had to carry out a very heavy affair. So keep in mind, the point I'm trying to make is, what would make you find a fault in that certain people, or certain those tribes, that lived during the time of the Message of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and some of those who had went astray from those tribes, that Abu Bakr, of course, alhamdulillah, brought a lot of them back. Even though a lot of them had started following those certain false prophets. What would make you find it far off that the Muslims later on would follow misguidance? You understand? So that's the point I'm trying to make. In addition to certain Sahaba still living, from Ali ibn Abi Talib, from people who actually deemed him to be a deity. And this is Ali ibn Abi Talib still living. And he's telling them, you not to do that. What are you doing? Have you lost your mind? You think I'm a deity? He said, you're a ilah. You're a deity of worship. Until he gave them 3 days to make tawbah. Even though he denied it to their face. You're worshiping me? Who were the first groups of the Shia back then. That was the first group. And that was during the time, like we said, of the Sahaba still living. People being misguided. So what would make you find, like we said, in the later generations after the death of the Sahaba, that will find it far off that Muslims will embrace misguided ideologies? It's not far off. You understand where I'm coming from? Do you understand the point I'm trying to make?
Yes.
So affairs, and so we'll stop here, inshallah. I'm sorry, I ain't gonna make it too long. Any other questions, anyone? Anything else? I'm sorry, what was your question? I'm sorry, I apologize. My apologies.
You had said something about people prostrating to the Prophet earlier.
Prostrate to the Prophet?
Did you say something about that?
I don't think I did. Did I? I don't think I did. Anybody prostrated to the Message of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, those affairs did happen, but he prohibited it. It did happen, but he prohibited that the one do that. He said the sujood only for Allah. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say, you was explaining to us that the prostration that was made to Adam was out of greeting and nobility.
Show honor, nobility, show honor. To show honor, ikram. The sujood of the malaika for Adam is sujood al-tahiyyah wal-ikram, not sujood al-ibadah. The sujood of the angels for Adam is a sujood of greeting and honor, not worship. Is it clear? sujood al-tahiyyah with ikram. And that the affair actually was glorifying Allah. Why? It was actually worship of Allah because Allah told the malaika to prostrate to Adam. Is it clear? Well, not told them, but commanded them, excuse me. He commanded them to make sujood to Adam. What was it? I'm sorry. So during the shara'i', the legislations of the past, sujood was meant something else in certain cases. Sujood was for something else to show honor and reverence to someone. For example, the Sharia of Yusuf. In the Sharia of Yusuf, notice Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said at the end of Surah Yusuf, what happened? That all his brothers and his mother and his father fell in prostration to him. It's in there. Go back to the story. It's in the last couple of pages in Surah Yusuf. In Surah Yusuf, the last 2 pages of Surah Yusuf, read it. That they fell in prostration to him. What kind of prostration is that? That's to let you know that the shara'i' of the past were what? Different. They were slightly different in certain legislations. Not in the usul of the religion as far as the tawheed. It's the same. In regards to the worship of Allah, all the prophets and the messengers were united. Certain shara'i' were different. Is it clear?
No.
Anything else? We'll stop here. وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه سبحانك وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.